Welcome to Face to Face. And today I'm Camillo Mac Bica with our guest, and we're going to talk about war. He's a professor of philosophy, Vietnam veteran, and a member of the chapter of Veteran for Peace in Long Island. Welcome to Face to Face.
Well, thank you, David. Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here and talk with you about this important subject.
I know it's a crazy world on that level. How did you end up? First, let me start to see how did you end up as being a veteran against war? It's an unusual.
Well, I don't know. I think it was a very rational and reasonable progression once one experiences what war is truly like. And I think that's the important thing, is to come to an understanding of the reality of what war truly is. I think we have been carefully programmed to believe that war is noble and heroic, and it's more like a video game than the reality of what it truly is. So I think when one experiences it for what it truly is, I think it's a natural progression to say that this is not a good thing, and maybe we should do something about it.
So so you wrote books of the consequences of what was the military personal experiment during war, and focusing on the philosophical aspect and the experience itself. Can you describe it a bit more?
Yeah, I think for me as a philosopher, whenever I speak somewhere, I tend to wonder who it is that is going to speak. Is it going to be the war veteran, or is it going to be the philosopher? Now, the war veteran speaks from like where it hurts. The philosopher speaks from the mind, and in a sense, I'm fortunate in that in my philosophical research, all I need to do is to introspect, to go inside and to come in touch with the experiences that I had. I mean, that's a good thing for my philosophical work, because I merely have to look inside in order to figure out how to handle this stuff. But it's also kind of troubling, because I tend to look at myself as being sort of schizophrenic, jumping back and forth from one personality, from one identity to another. After serving in the military, all my life wanting to be a Marine officer, and finally accomplishing that, I was very disappointed when I learned the reality of what it was truly about and what war was truly about. And at 21, I was a Marine officer who served with the 26th Marine Regimental Landing Team in 1969-70 in Vietnam. And I participated in an enterprise whose sole purpose, from the best I could ascertain, was to kill people and blow stuff up. I couldn't see any justification for it. As an officer of Marines, I saw my responsibility as preserving the lives of some 30 or so young Marines.
So on that line, I think the process of the war now, it's killing more civilian than it's killing military personnel. I mean, and we have consequences like, 500 million of children who are in zone war. So what is this dynamic of the war today, who's really affecting more the civilian than and of course the military, but it's a very, for the society at large, it's a very complicated situation.
It is, and we killed plenty of civilians in Vietnam as well. I mean, as was the case in World War II, the terror bombing of cities actually targeted and killed many civilians. We have evolved from face-to-face warfare, and have come into the 21st century of robotic warfare, a warfare by drones. We do that because it's an easier sell to the population when they don't see or they don't know about American bodies coming back in body bags or in coffins. And that, I mean, that was one of the difficulties in keeping support for the Vietnam War, was every evening on the news, you saw these horrible newsreels from Vietnam or from bodies coming home. And that eventually people, I hope, get smart and say, you know, war is really awful. Maybe we should stop it. So we've learned that lesson, the lesson that we should keep people, we should antiseptize war. We should make it antiseptic. We should, I remember George W. Bush told us, just go shopping and don't worry about the war. We have a professional military now, and you're not going to get drafted.
And they stopped to see the coffin coming back on the plane, and they stopped to show blood on the TV. It was like bang.
Yeah. I mean, that's certainly a wonderful learning technique, but we don't have that anymore. Why? Because they realized that in order to keep support for war, or to keep indifference and apathy towards war, they need to screen us from the reality. We have no war tax. We have no draft. Some less than 2% of our population actually serve in the military. So we are, in fact, just going shopping and ignoring the war. I teach a course on the mythology of war over at the school. And on the first day of class, I'll ask the students, well, what's going on in the world today? And are we at war? And no one seems to know. And I don't blame them, because, you know, they're young and they have other more important things, allegedly, to concern themselves with. But we have successfully kept war off the screen. We have made war into a video game. We have made war entertaining. And that's all people want to know about war. They don't want to know the reality. They don't want to see the photos and the pictures coming home from war. So we have this remote, robotic war by drone. It is an important part of what we call force protection. We don't want people to die, and at least Americans to die. We don't care about the people we're going to kill, or people who happen to be in the area of people we allegedly trying to kill. We dehumanize them, of course, as collateral damage. We don't even call them human beings. We call them collateral damage. And we feel that that's perfectly okay, perfectly justified, because that wasn't our intent. Our intent was to kill the bad guy, Osama bin Laden, or the next Osama bin Laden, or the next one after that. So whoever happens to be in the area dies, and we just...
It's bad luck.
It's bad luck. It's unfortunate, but it's the reality of war.
Yeah. So, and then you study a lot the consequences of the how the military, how veterans were affected at the psychological level, and you say go beyond PTSD. Can you little bit describe that?
Yeah, I think it took a long time for this government to even recognize post-traumatic stress. I don't call it post-traumatic stress disorder, because I don't think it's a disorder. I think it's merely the inevitable consequence of experiencing a horrible situation. But it took them, and it wasn't until I think 1979 when it was finally recognized. But what was never recognized until relatively recently, and it's not even in the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, what we call moral injury. And I'm a philosopher who specializes in ethics and morality. So this has always been an important consideration for me, the ethics of what we're doing and the impact of violating our moral compass on what sort of consequences that has. That has very serious consequences, giving us shame and guilt and alienation for the rest of the community. And we have ignored that. I wrote a paper early on moral injuries in war. And when I presented it at a Veterans Administration grand rounds, I had psychiatrists and psychologists coming up to me after, telling me that, well, this is all very interesting, but considerations of morality is clinically irrelevant. So they didn't think it had anything to do with the readjustment difficulties that soldiers, Marines, and whomever were coming home from war were experiencing. But
Because
yeah,
I mean, what I do know, it's like 30% of the veterans are homeless in New York. So it's a huge number and because it's a lot of homeless people in New York City, and it's a huge number on that population.
It is, and not only homelessness, but alcoholism and drug abuse and suicides. I mean, depending on who you listen to, somewhere between 20 and 22 veterans each day commit suicide. What a national disgrace that is. I mean, 20 to 22 veterans each day commit suicide. Why? Because they're alienated. They don't know who they are. They've been indoctrinated into this warrior mentality. Look, warriors aren't made, we don't kill by nature. We kill by nurture. Killers have to be manufactured. They have to be made. And we're very good at that. That's what boot camp and basic training is all about, creating young men and women who will kill. So once we assume that personality, we abandon the behaviors and the identity of a non-warrior and assume at a very vulnerable age of 18, 19, 20, we drop all that. Military is very good at that, and we assume and we become a warrior. When I became a Marine, when they finally called me Marine, they don't call you a Marine right away. You have to earn that. And when they finally called me Marine, boy, I was so proud because I thought I truly had accomplished something. I left behind that old life and now assumed this immortality, this knight in shining armor of being the Marine. Unfortunately, and then once we have been indoctrinated in that, they send us to a war zone where those behaviors are reinforced by the insanity of the battlefield. Unfortunately, once we have finished serving their purpose and we come home, there is no reverse boot camp.
So for you, as a long run, the training of being a military doesn't end up in suicide, or it doesn't have any future at the long run for someone.
We don't know who we are. I mean, when you come home, now you're supposed to reintegrate into a non-killing, non-warring environment. You're supposed to just take up where you left off. And it's not all that easy when you have been stripped of all the appropriate behaviors and values that are necessary to reintegrate into a non-warring, non-killing environment. So we're in limbo. That's why you see many veterans walking around, even veterans from my war, old guys like me in their 70s and late 60s, still walking around with camouflage on.
I know.
Because they haven't left, and we say to them, welcome home. And people who are watching this say, well, why are you saying welcome home? They've been home for 50 years. Yeah. Physically they've been home, but psychologically, emotionally, morally, they're stuck in the war zone because we haven't allowed them to transition to the identity appropriate for this environment.
How can we transform that situation? How can
Not war.
So for you, the only way to resolve it is to stop war.
That's a straightforward, easiest way. Stop relying. We need more diplomacy. Now, our new president is talking more about, reviewing our strategic policies and to rely more on diplomacy rather than on bombing. But one of the first things he does when he comes into office is bomb Syria. So, I hope.
That was my next question. It's how do you think we're gonna which direction are we getting with our new president? So you almost answer.
I don't know. I wasn't. He wasn't my first choice because I just felt that he was going. He wasn't Trump, that's for sure, but he would be more of the same, maintaining the status quo. And it's too late for the status quo. We have to go in a new direction. Look, we've been fighting the war in Afghanistan going on 19 years, and we still haven't resolved anything. What is the solution? Well, one thing I can tell you is I know what the solution is not. And the solution is continuing to stay and do things that haven't given us success. So let's try something different. Let's look at another option. Let's look at peace. Let's give peace a chance and see what we can do with that.
All right, we're running out. Anything you want to close? Anything you want to plug? Any information people should know about in something happening in the next few weeks?
Well, there's a lot of things going on. I mean, if you are interested, if you're a veteran, or even if you're not, you can hook up with your local chapter of Veterans for Peace. There's a chapter here on Long Island, although we're kind of on sabbatical now with the pandemic.
Yeah.
The chapter in New York City and Manhattan is still very active, so you can contact them as well.
All right, thank you very much. Really appreciate your being with us. That was your show Face to Face, and please keep watching your news on presenza.com, and we hope to hear from you very soon. Thank you very much.